John, let's come to you first. Walk us through the pessimist's guide then. What is it telling us?
Well, really, in a lot of ways, I mean, what we're getting at here is that the world is becoming a more unpredictable, riskier place, as sort of the rules that governed global politics for a lot of the last 20 or 30 years sort of unraveled to a certain extent. We've seen, for example, Putin's Putin's growing militarism in Eastern Europe. Some of the rules that, for example, ruled the Eurozone for a long time, seem to be unraveling for a while. And especially with the Fed raising interest rates tomorrow, and of course, who knows where they'll go over the next year or so, the safety blanket that we had for a long time around geopolitical risk is sort of going away a little bit. So politics is becoming more important for markets, and that's what we're trying to get at with this.
You've launched an interactive graphic. Yes. As I flick through some of these, the top three risks. You've talked to a lot of people. Tina, we'll come to you in a moment because it ties in very nicely in terms of Merkel, in terms of politics, and in terms of terrorism. But give us the top three, and of course you can go to Bloomberg.com and pick up these. Oil at $100.
So of course, one of the things we're talking about a lot at the moment is oil falling, right? There's a lot of the speculation in the market. Oil could go down to $30, $20. Pick a price and you'll find someone who predicts it. But actually, one of the counterintuitive risks, if you like, of 2016 is in fact, Islamic State, for example. A lot of people talk about what would happen if they went out and struck Saudi or Iraqi oil installations. If you talk to some intelligence officials out in the Middle East, that is one of their secret concerns. Brexit, obviously, that's sort of one of the known knowns, I guess, of 2016.
Yes.
Big concern for a lot of the people we spoke to. And cyber. Cyber is a very interesting one. And specifically, what would happen if hackers decided to target Wall Street and the city?
And Tina, how does the oil thing tie in with the risks that you see ahead for 2016?
Well, I guess I'm still more concerned about the political risks of low oil prices, to be honest, and the pressure that puts on producing countries. I think we have to keep an eye on Venezuela, clearly, but the pressure on regimes and the risk of a sort of Arab Spring relapse is one of the things that is on my mind.
You make one of the points, Tina, that geopolitical risks are at a 25-year high. There's been a dramatic and measurable increase in the number of elections, mass protests, government collapses over the past 3 years, a 54% increase versus the previous decade. I mean, this is your poll, this is your political analysis, your vox populi. It's quite a... Are we reaching a crescendo in terms of the political movements?
Well, this is the big question for 2016. Is this the year that these rising geopolitical risks on the one hand and rising vox populi risks on the other converge and actually become too significant for policymakers to deal with in the incremental piecemeal approach that we've seen?
What do you put these increasing populist concerns down to? The rise of non-mainstream parties. I read some analysis yesterday that talked about, in the US case, a decline of the middle classes and an increasing gap between the bottom and the top end of the income scale. Is that something that you see reflected globally as a worry?
Well, there are a lot of factors that are at work, but in the U.S. case, certainly stagnant real wages, the shrinking middle class. What's interesting, though, and that's a Pew poll that came out, is that you have both more wealthy people and poorer people, but this sense that the middle class is under siege, and really the tensions between globalism and nationalism that Marine Le Pen talked about.
The one thing that strikes me about both, John, in yours, Merkel's fall is the subtitle within your piece, but also you talk about Merkel exit.
Yeah.
I thought it was fascinating. She went for like a vote of confidence yesterday with her party. Who would have thought at the start of 2015 that Angela Merkel would be calling for a vote of confidence in her policy? Is this the under-assumed dissipation of Merkel?
Well, what I would say, first of all, if you look at the broader narrative here, what you're seeing again is the unintended consequence of a geopolitical event as big as the slow implosion of Syria. We haven't really seen anything like this in Europe since the end of the Cold War. And when you see something like that happening, a country like Syria collapsing from within and these vast flows of refugees, it's extremely unpredictable to see how that will play out. So as you said, who a year ago would have thought that this would filter into the German political debate in this way?
Tina, when you talk about Angela Merkel, you make the point, though, that, I mean, she's not up for election until 2017, so it's the US before that. But you make the point that at the moment, there aren't really any alternatives. That's the analysis?
Well, I think the risk is that her own party worries that they won't win the next election because Merkel, of course, is popular across the German population. And would the CDU be able to do as well with a different candidate? But of course, it's Germans who elect the next chancellor and the next government, but it's all of Europe that is really it needs Merkel's leadership, which is why I flag it as such a significant risk.
Very briefly from both of you, Brexit rising. It's becoming much more of a real proposition. I mean, you've got the Boris image in here and you've got the Cameron image in here, John.
The argument has not yet been won. I mean, I think there isn't this assumption, you know, because Scotland voted to stay in ultimately, there is sort of, I think, a latent expectation out there that ultimately the UK will vote to stay in. But in a binary vote where there's so much fluidity at the moment, it's really hard to say. It's probably slightly better than 50-50 that they'll stay in, but maybe not a lot more than that.